have to say, when I started the subject today for today's podcast, I was very excited. But the more I studied, the more I realized how precarious everything really is. Because today we're going to talk about security, about feeling safe. Now, come on, life can be hard, but we all want to feel safe, to feel secure. And I was under the mistaken belief that the first armies formed were about keeping a people, a city-state, secure and safe. Wrong. As civilizations evolved, agriculture creates a surplus of food, and it also allows the rise of a ruling class of free time of different crafts and services like pottery and woodworking and even accounting and weapons manufacturing. The thing about it is, as a people grew, even their own resources became stretched, and thus the arrival of a standing army. And it's believed that the first was probably in Mesopotamia, and the expansion into other city-states to plunder, rob, and enslave for more resources, more power, greater security. The pattern repeats itself throughout history. Expansion, enslavement, and then that reach too far that produced the downfall of the expanding powers. Too big to manage, too big with a centralized. I mean, think about it. If it takes 3 days for communication to get somewhere, or think about an ocean where it takes 30 days to get a message somewhere, it's hard to manage. So for many of these rise and fall city-states, from China to, again, Mesopotamia, Babylon, Greece, and Rome, their history's just full of them. They would come and go, offering these brief periods of stability and safety. Now, within this ongoing pattern, human beings, again, had only brief periods of safety and security. And many of us today realize we're in one of those. Many of us today, we don't recognize that the same forces are at work today, and it is for the sake of our own security that we're taking it all for granted. It's easy to do that. Now, after 50 years in Christian ministry, I can say with little doubt that the church is about two things: offering comfort and justification. People want to feel safe and secure and justified in their way of life. This is part of what people have been reaching for. They just want things to mellow out. A lot of them say, if they could just stay the same, or if we could just go back when everything was secure. The human journey to be safe and secure has been a long one, and today there are these new challenges. These new efforts, from nuclear war to climate change to pandemics. Yet we all want to feel safe, even in the midst of all of this. Now, this feeling we have, this is called emotional security. And it's a bedrock to psychological stability and psychological resilience, which is a great word, resilience, which reflects our ability to change with the times and the circumstances, because nothing stays the same. Remember our podcast on the I Ching? It's all in flux, man. And our own emotional security has had a good run as a people, but is showing signs of fraying, and can be seen in our own politics domestically or the global politics. As the leader of the United Nations said a week or two ago, the world is becoming unhinged. And not everybody has always felt safe and secure on this planet, but more and more have. But those of us who have felt safe and secure, we need to realize our rising emotional insecurity, and that it creates a biased perception. Now, Abraham Maslow, he described an insecure person as a person who, and I'm quoting here, perceives the world as a threatening jungle and most human beings as dangerous and selfish. He or she feels like a rejected and isolated person, anxious and hostile, is generally pessimistic and unhappy, shows signs of tension and conflict, tends to turn inward, is troubled by guilt feelings, has one or another disturbance of self-esteem, tends to be neurotic, and is generally selfish and egocentric. Sounds like the MAGA folks, like Trump, some of our world leaders today. As a matter of fact, that's a great description of some of these folks. Whether a city-state's perceived need to expand or to ensure its security, or an individual's need to dominate another, the result is the same. We all want to feel safe, and our security, whether of a people or a person, is integral for us to be growing human beings. So it comes down to this. How can the human family move together that we might have a safe and secure planet with fully functioning human beings, with all our differences, and all with these common needs of food, housing, meaningful work, education, a sense of a future? Is feeling safe and secure only and always just a brief moment in our history, or is there a way to root a real and ongoing world where people can take a breath and feel safe over many generations? And I'm talking about more than 70 years. I'm talking about a way of us rooting ourselves, and I like that word, rooting, that we might be resilient. And all the differences among us, they're going to create this amazing event that is the planet. So I guess I'm turning it over to my two co-hosts. Bob Hays is coming from Florida, Anne Ruddis from Spokane Valley. My name is Redhawk, and I'm coming from Spokane, up above the South Hill. And I'll open it to you first, Bob. What say you on this front?
Well, like most things in behavioral, psychological, sociological investigations, it's very complicated. Maslow was very insightful when he developed his pyramid of needs, and the base of that pyramid is safety and security. Because without anything else, without feeling secure, you don't have the time, the energy, or the motivation to think deep thoughts, to move beyond the activities that are going to try and secure your safety and security. Now, one of the things that people fail to understand about Maslow's pyramid is it's not a one-shot deal. It's not you move up that pyramid, and once you get to the top, you're self-actualizing and you're thinking wonderful thoughts and so forth. It's a constant movement. It reminds me of the childhood game Chutes and Ladders.
And what you're talking about is the hierarchy of needs, correct?
Exactly. But it's as you move through your life, you're constantly going up and down that hierarchy. It's like that Chutes and Ladder game. And you never know what's going to happen in your life that's going to send you back down to the bottom. And it happens more often than one imagines. And it happens in both the macro level of your whole life and the micro level of how you're dealing with specific events. So it's so important. It is the foundation, and it's something that affects everything that we deal with in every phase of our life. And it's constantly in flux.
And just to lay out for our listeners, the hierarchy of needs is there's physiological needs, safety needs, belongingness and love needs, esteem needs, and then there's self-actualizing, which is what Bob was bringing into some forward relief. Marianne?
Well, I think when it comes to the idea of security and safety, in my mind, it's pretty much an illusion that exists outside of us. And I think you talked about emotional security, and I think that's where, and again, moving up that hierarchy of needs, you can only find emotional security or explore that when you feel a level of safety and security in your world. Because if you're constantly running and afraid, then you're not going to be able to find that. So it's kind of like a catch-22, but we all know that anything can happen at any moment to any of us. A hurricane can hit and wipe out your house, or 9/11 happened, and in an instant, people just went from feeling secure in their country to being insecure. And so how do we get that back? How do we get back to that safety and security that we need to have? And for me, I think it's when we learn how to find that internal place where we can say that, yes, we can control our responses to these things. And we can start to find a level of safety and security in our own responses and in our own belief that we can adapt, we can change, we can handle what comes our way. And I think when we get to that place, then we can start to maybe create a more stable environment that we live in permanently. But I don't know that that's the case right now.
Yeah, whether it's possible. And
whether I didn't want to say that, but because I really believe anything's possible. But
yeah, but it's also shows how difficult, and as Bob opened, it's more complex. And there's a lot of billions of people on this planet, and we, as Bob has said, often we're all different. We all have our own idiosyncrasies. We all have that. And I like that you said it's an illusion. If you look up mental security, you're able to regain a sense of control over your surroundings and ensure the protection of your loved ones as well. I like that, a sense of control. I'm not sure we actually have it. And that, of course, brings in the issue of free will and all that stuff. And if you keep going into the security issue as a mental, psychological, I don't know who came up with this, but they came up with 4 different conditions psychologically that you want to feel safe. You want to feel included. You want to feel safe to learn. You want to feel safe to contribute and safe to challenge the status quo. And I think that last one is huge, especially if you look at places in the world that are people are no longer safe to challenge the status quo. And there's a movement in this country to make it difficult to challenge the status quo. So there's these aspects of feeling safe that we have to create the conditions for. And to do that as a planet, Marianne, I don't want to use the word impossible either, but in our lifetime, it seems very improbable that there will be a coming together unless there's some huge traumatic event for the whole planet. And it can't be the slow climate change or a pandemic. It has to be something, maybe it's nuclear war. Maybe it's all the volcanoes going off at once and 12 to 15 hurricanes are always occurring on the planet, and we need to get together on that. Maybe it's an alien invasion. I don't know, but it seems to me something traumatic has got to happen in order to bring us together. Go ahead, Bob.
Well, I was just going to say that there's a paradox there, too, because what you're describing are events that are going to make us feel less safe. They're going to bring us together. But the reason they're bringing us together is we don't feel secure. And
so we have to work together to become safe and secure.
Yeah, but again, the problem is when you don't feel safe, you're not making clear, intelligent decisions. Because if you remember, I think we've talked about it, the triune theory of the brain, where we can get pushed back into the reptilian portion of our brain, where everything is fight or flight. And when you don't feel safe and secure, you're pushed back into that area of your brain, which by definition means you're not making many good choices. So, yeah, we need to pull together and we need to deal with these events, but the events themselves make it difficult to deal with them.
Well, and and that goes back to what I was saying before. The outside circumstances we can't control, and we can never feel safe that a comet's not going to hit the Earth, right? But we can't live in that fear, and that's where the safety and security has to come from inside of us to say that even if 15 hurricanes hit us or the comet hits us, that we are a resilient, and you used that word earlier, we're a resilient species and we'll figure it out. And that's where that can keep us being able to make rational decisions, right? Yes, because when you run scared, we live with uncertainty. And how do you live within that uncertainty in a healthy and evolved way? And I think that's where the only place that we can look is inward.
And this is a huge piece, Marianne. You put your finger on something, the inward piece, because the outward piece is creating a narrative by which our own vulnerability and fallibility can be faced with the same sense of curiosity as a child follows an ant. We have to be able to look at those aspects, and I think that's part of the refinement of the human being's self-perception, that we are moving to finer gradations of understanding. We are beginning to understand that one's own vulnerability is not a weakness, but a source of strength, where one can become someone new by owning that vulnerability. We're also seeing that, I like Milley saying, General Milley saying, I made a big mistake. I should never have been there. His own fallibility becomes a point of vulnerability, which allows some immense change of mind and sense of being and context. Again, it creates a narrative that allows us to see that sometimes the cornerstone that is rejected is what supports the larger piece of architecture, if that makes sense.
Well, if we could go back to trying to become in tune with the flow of the universe. And I think that's what Marianne is getting at in terms of the safety being an illusion. Things are happening in the universe that are far beyond our understanding. And if we can try to be level-headed and try to find the flow of our lives, then that's when we don't get hung up on momentary feelings of unsafety and feelings of lack of security. Because what's really happening beyond our individual selves, if you believe this, which I do, there's something bigger going on. And we can try and align ourselves with that, in which case we don't have to worry about safety and security anymore.
And now go ahead, Marianne.
I was going to say, and that's trust. And do we have trust in something that things that are happening for a kind of like a prescribed reason, and that we can not only handle it, but we can evolve from it. And so then it becomes more of a journey, following the ant, even if that takes us into a deep puddle or a fire ant nest.
And it's not a problem of execution. It's a problem of reframing the work so that our fallibilities, our vulnerabilities, the flow of the universe, we are the universe. So we're back to what is our deepest nature. And a part of it is curiosity. It has to do with reaching for the next thing. Regrettably, reaching for the next thing has been a better weapon. but it's also produced MRIs. It's also produced these vaccines. It's doing all these things that are reframing our vulnerabilities in a way that allows us to respond. And I think that's the issue, is to see the flow of the universe, that curiosity and reaching and finding the new and becoming, I hate to use the word reborn, but at least renewed, with each passing trauma, if you will, and not to demean or to lessen what those traumas are, but to see them as a moment and a place where something full and vibrant is trying to speak to us in ways that is enhancing new thoughts, is bringing new thoughts into our way of thinking. And again, framing, to put it in a context. And I think that's one of the big things that the human being, we're the time of us, we're moving from mere content to context, learning that we can't understand any content without seeing its context. And I think I pray that serves the human family well. And who knows?
Well, I think what you said is really, it's a huge shift, and it's something that needs to happen. If we can feel safe and vulnerable at the same time, so being safe in our vulnerability versus feeling like we have to be strong to be safe, and that we have to be able to fight off and ward off everything, then I think that's going to be a huge shift that we can, because we are vulnerable, all of us. And so how do we find safety within that vulnerability? I think that's a huge, huge shift.
Well, and what you just laid out was a new definition of strong. That strong is not force. Strong, many times, we're back to yin and yang. It's not always a hard forward. It's sometimes an open backward. And, you talked about it being an inner issue. I think that's huge. And how I talked about a change of the narrative. And, the word strong, the definition of that word, and the associations that go with it will shift, where strong is not someone who never cries. Strong is someone who is able to cry. That whole concept, I think, is huge, to let people in and to see our vulnerabilities. And I'll be honest, men have been ruling for 10,000 years, and men tend to deny their vulnerabilities, cover it up with inventory or with intellectualization or denial or all kinds of different shit. And so...
Big weapons.
Yeah, my weapon's bigger than yours. What did Russia do as soon as they got the nuclear power? They built a hydrogen bomb, which is literally 1,000 times more powerful than the bomb we dropped on Hiroshima. I go, what the hell? Why did we do it? Because we can. Wasn't that the point of Jurassic Park? We do it because we can, but you never asked whether you should.
Well, and we're told that that's what's going to make us safe, right? And that's that safety through strength. And it doesn't. It makes us less safe.
Well, it's gotten to that point, and I think that's the new point of the human family. Because it used to be that bigger weapons would make you safe. We've gotten to the point of diminishing returns where they will not make you safe anymore. That was what Nobel was trying to say. He thought dynamite was going to change the picture. Well, dynamite was, an apostrophe along the way. So we're the human family, we must struggle with our sense of security and safety in such a way that we move beyond mutual assured destruction. which is where the human family is now, which is basically we'll just play chicken. So, final comments, Mary Ann?
Well, I just think that when it comes to feeling safe, I think Bob was absolutely right. We have to have that security in order, a sense of safety and security in order to access anything higher. But at the same time, many of us have experienced things that prove that we are not safe. We just had some major fires out here that can happen, all the time. So how can we find equilibrium? How can we find a sense of safety and security in those disasters? And I think a community coming together after that, the resilience of people to be able to find a way to rebuild, and we come together to do that. And I think you were talking about that earlier, Redhawk. So I think that we can find that safety and security by knowing that we're not alone in this, whether it's our community or it's a higher power or whatever it is that you look to. Just we're not islands, and that's where I think our safety lies.
Amen. Bob, final comments?
Well, I've used the phrase "a numbers game" a lot of times on our various episodes, but I think that what we need to do is think about and support the kind of policies that are going to make more people globally feel more secure. And that's, are they going to have enough food? Are they going to have enough clean water? We can't back away from that, because as long as there's groups that are literally starving to death, they're going to be taking actions that are going to make us less secure. We see it in the migrations that are happening all over the world. It's not just our southern border. It's everywhere. People are leaving areas where there's famine and where there's harsh dictatorships and so forth, and trying to move to a safer place. If we don't develop the compassion that leads to policies that help them feel more secure, then we as a species are never going to be able to feel secure.
Yeah, boy, isn't that the truth. And the whole thing about caring, sometimes we miss something. And I think, there's a part of our nature that is so amazing and so magnificent that we see people at the border and we miss seeing what really is happening. So next week, or our next podcast, we're going to talk about the extravagant and magnificent nature of nature herself. And that's in us. Think of the rye plant. This fact blew me away. The rye plant, if you took a cubic inch of soil underneath the roots, and you took all the little hairs off those roots and lined them up, it would go 6,000 miles. Now, I'm not making this up. That's a lot of root hairs. That's a lot of extravagance. That's magnificent. You go somewhere where nature in all her diversity is happening. You see the network of the bugs flying through the air. You see the birds. You see ground creatures. You see tree creatures. Whew. It's amazing. It's amazing. So we're going to go to the extravagance of nature and how we find that in ourselves. Can we? Is it there? Well, it's everywhere else. If it's in the rye plant, I think it's in the human being. We hope you'll join us. Until then, be well, be one, and be blessed.